Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. As you can tell by the brown leaves, we are now heading into autumn and it is probably the best time of year. But what that means is the tench fishing goes downhill from here as it gets colder. So I wanted one last ditch attempt to film some tench underwater, looking at them from a different perspective on the local canal. And I've got some fantastic footage. Now the aim of this session was actually to film a method feeder on the bottom of the canal to see how these fish react in my sort of more tenchy swims. I had multiple swims to try over multiple days. I didn't want to fish areas where there was bream. I used to fish the method feeder a lot for bream back in the day on the canal and caught loads of fish. But the problem is, like you saw in my last underwater video on the canal, the moment you get the bream feeding in the swim, they colour it up so much. The underwater camera can't see anything after that. So the aim was to go to areas where there was predominantly tench over bream, fish the method feeder and see exactly how the fish react on the canal to the feeder. So my first attempt at filming went not so great. I'd positioned my camera essentially to the left of where my swim was. So I was putting the method feeder in and it was about a foot to the right of where the actual camera was. So unfortunately I didn't really get much footage. I did even get a tench take the hook bait in that swim, which is pretty gutting. One of the things that was very noticeable was the amount of rudd, friggin' loads of rudd, throughout this entire canal system, and I knew that these were going to be an issue through the entire filming process. But I did eventually reposition the camera that session and managed to get a bit of footage, tench coming down, working the way around the feeder, but no more fish taking the hook bait, loads and loads of rudd, absolutely going mad on the micro pellets. I was fishing 2mm micros in the feeder. And that was pretty much it. First session done and dusted, got some footage, wasn't good enough. Now it's time for session 2. As I was going to be filming in lots of different swims during this filming period, I brought my large SKP rucksack. The rod and reel setup that I'm using to catch these tench, the rod is essentially the same one I was using for the barbel in my most recent barbel video, the SKP Concept 11-foot Specialist, paired up with the Super Team FL 3000 reel. And that was hopefully what I was going to use to be able to tame these tench on the method feeder on the canal. What I decided to do on session 2 was fish a much brighter hook bait so it was very, very noticeable in front of the camera. Much like the carp guys do with the underwater carp stuff, a bright fluoro pop-up, obviously easy to pick up on camera, you can watch the fish take it quite easily. And it also fits in with the whole specimen theory that if you put a bait out there that's completely different to your feed that you're feeding, that perhaps that will attract the fish over to that quicker. But as you can see now in this footage, that wasn't the case. It was really cool seeing the tench coming in, working the way around the feeder, grabbing all those 2mm micro pellets, also the rudd going absolutely crazy on the micros. But that fluoro bait, which was sort of like a brightly coloured sweet corn almost, was being completely ignored by the tench. And it actually asks the question, does using a bright fluorescent hookbait aid you in getting bites or actually be detrimental? Because if I'd have been using, let's say, a 3 or 4 mil pellet, the same colour as the feed I was using, I reckon there would have been a higher chance of getting one of them tench to take the bait. Now, I mentioned bream earlier on, and this is a swim I didn't expect there to be many bream in, but as always in this canal, bream are spread out through it, and it did not take long before the bream descended on this swim, and they went ham. They were tearing it up, they were colouring the water up, and even the bream were avoiding the brightly coloured hookbait. They were just eating the 2 mil micro pellets until the water was so coloured up and there was so much commotion and so much weed that this eventually happened. Fish on, fish on, fish on, fish on. Oh, it's a bream. Ah, damn it. Not the tench we were after. Now bream, I love catching them when I'm not going for tench. And this is an absolutely fantastic slab of a canal bream. The swim went crazy, mud flying up everywhere, tench, must have been about 5 or 6 bream ripping it up. I don't think you'll be able to see anything on the underwater camera there, unfortunately. And this one absolutely nailed that yellow bait he had on the bottom. Absolutely awesome, but not quite that tench I'm looking for. Right, let's put this one back. So what we learned from that session was in fact a brightly coloured hookbait compared to your neutral coloured feed can actually be detrimental to catching the larger species of fish sometimes. Even the bream were avoiding that brightly coloured hookbait. If I were fishing a brown hookbait during that session, would I have got more bites? I think so. And unfortunately, even though there were so many fish feeding the swim, including tench, it just so happened to be a mega bream that ended up taking the hookbait. I don't mind. We got the take on camera, so that's pretty cool. So now it's time for the last underwater filming session. I decided to take what I'd learned from the other sessions and put it into practice. So I was going to start off the session using the method feeder, then end it by using just like a standard lead and a single hookbait on the bottom. So start off with the method feeder. This time I put more of a neutral coloured hookbait in the feeder. I had obviously the 2 mil micros, and then I was fishing a 6 mil, sort of like a burgundy red coloured soft hook pellet on a hair, and that was how I was going to spend basically the first half of this session. And just like the other sessions, tons and tons of rudd came into the swim. Thankfully no bream this time, but the tench were feeding, and I got some fantastic shots. They were feeding around the feeder, but they were still kind of avoiding the hookbait. The hookbait, that even though it stood out not that much, it was just, you know, a bit bigger than the feed I was using and a slightly different colour, they were still avoiding it. But it didn't take too long before eventually the fish picked up confidence, they started feeding more, colouring up the water, and the moment the water got coloured, that was when things started to happen. Yep, fish on, fish on. Yep, that's a tench, that is a tench. Yes. God, he is ripping drag. Soft red pellet, 6mm, as opposed to a bright yellow one. He's gonna need some snags now. It's gonna be a struggle to land because he's gone under loads of snags on the opposite bank. Come on. He's trying to get under every snag. It's not a bad size one either for the canal. The method feeder has caught all the weed, it's all bunched up round it. We got it, we frigging got it, yes! Oh, hopefully I captured that hook up underwater. That way I would have got the hook up underwater and me landing the fish. And the method feeder is disappeared underneath all that all that weed, and that is a good sized tench. And there we have it. What a beautiful canal tench. £4 1 ounce. That's right, I got some new scales with me. And a beautiful fish, and I'm pretty sure I might have got that on the underwater camera. It'd be really cool if I have. Getting hooked under the water on the method feeder to getting it in the net, all on camera. What a beautiful fish, and a beautiful setting, just going into autumn now. Amazing, let's get his fish back. What a beautiful fish. It was really cool, we managed to watch it get hooked up in front of the camera, as well as spooking off millions and millions of rudd that seemed to be down there, and then actually film it playing on the bank and getting it on the bank too. But now it's time for the second half of that session. Obviously I'd spooked off the entire swim, spooked the tench off, and I decided to keep it really simple. I just put on a free running lead with a short hook length of about 7 to 8 inches with a hair rigged pellet on, and then I just sprinkled a few free offerings over the top. I didn't want to attract any rudd. I didn't really want to attract loads of tench. I just wanted one fish to enter the swim and potentially get a hook up. And I'll show you the footage right now, and this is exactly what happened. So that was my hook bait right in the middle of the shot there, and I believe this was actually the same tench that came down within about a minute. It came in once, sucked down on top of the bait. I believe my hook was actually pointing down into the silt, which is why it didn't manage to pick it up. And then it came back round again, it came round in a circle, went back down to the feed, tried to pick up the pellet again and didn't manage to even get it into its mouth. Which is unfortunate because that would have been really cool getting a second take. But that brought us to the end. So to recap, what did we learn over the course of fishing this method feeder on the canal? Well, one, method feeder probably works best for the bream on the canal. I think it was a bit too much free offerings for the tench. They was very much preoccupied with all the pellets. What we also learned was you don't always want a bait that stands out for your hook bait. And I've learnt this with barbel fishing as well. I fished a barbel swim where I fed pellets and I fed maggots and I fished, let's say, a boilie over the top, and then I've watched them avoid the boilie. Just like in this instance, especially in the first session I tried filming, I was fishing a brightly coloured fluorescent yellow hook bait and the fish were basically avoiding it just to eat everything else around it. And the third lesson that we've learnt is rudd are absolute arseholes. Because if the rudd weren't down there, I could have just fished a couple of maggots on the hook. I could have fished a 3 or 4mm pellet on the hook, banded on, and I definitely would have got solid takes from them tench. I probably would have caught 3 or 4 as opposed to just the one that I managed to get. I also managed to lose a tench as well, which was pretty gutting, but that's just how it goes sometimes. So thank you guys for watching. If you found this video interesting, I have done more underwater videos on the channel. So if you want to go onto the channel and check them out, you can do. Feel free to subscribe if you want to. If you've liked it, like it. I'm going to be doing some pike underwater filming soon. I'm going to be filming pike on still waters from them actually picking up the hook bait to the float on the surface in real time, so you actually know how long it takes a pike to eat a bait with how much movement you get on the float. So make sure you stay tuned for that, because that's going to be really interesting and hopefully we'll learn a lot from that. And I'll catch you guys later. Thanks for watching.